Brandon, do you have
Never a closed session, right?
No, I don't think so. Do we have anything to put up on the?
Oh, you know,
We're ready whenever you're ready.
oh,
Welcome, everybody. This is a South Weaver City Council meeting of June 29th, 2021 at 6 p.m. right now. And all council members are in attendance with the exception of Councilman Halverson, who has been excused tonight. We're here for, we'll just go right into our agenda. Ordinance 2021-09, restricting personal fireworks. So on June 22nd, the council discussed the possibility of restricting fireworks and decided the safety issues outweigh the entertainment value. Ordinance 2021-09 will create a temporary restriction of personal fireworks while allowing the professional display for country fair days in August. So the ordinance is in your packet. Are there comments or questions on this ordinance?
Chief, has there been any change to the state's perspective of?
No.
Any change from your perspective as to the urgency and the risks that the city's faced?
I think until we see significant rain, there's going to be a significant amount for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
That's just where we're at. You can get, like I mentioned last meeting, if we get significant rain, unless it's ongoing and keeping things wet, chances are we get a lot of rain and then another dry spell, it's just going to be worse. Barring rain every day.
Other questions?
I got some questions, comments.
Sure.
I have a question relative to the spark generating equipment. Will that mean that our construction projects that are cutting cement and other metal on, cement or other things that might cause sparks would not be allowed either? I'm afraid we're trying to address the firework thing, and now it seems like we're being too restrictive of other flames, like somebody smoking in their backyard. And I appreciate Chief Tolman sending out the ignition control source. I actually like the wording that's in there that gives exceptions. For instance, on the smoking, it prohibits smoking except with, if you're within 15 feet of combustible material. But then it says an exception in places of habitation or the boundaries of established smoking areas. I would have a hard time telling my neighbors that they have to smoke inside or quit smoking because they don't smoke inside for a reason. And then the same thing, I'm just worried about the equipment. If we have construction equipment going or in process, and they've got these metal blades or whatever that are hitting rocks or something hard, that's going to be creating a spark. I just want clarification on that.
Do you want to go or do you want me to go?
well, maybe I can set the legal parameters and then you can help fill in the policy rationale or inform the policy decision the council has to make. At the end of the day, this is a legislative decision by the city council. And so you can consider and apply whatever policy principles you'd like to bring to bear on this. And so I would say, Councilman Soderquist, if you feel like these are too restrictive and would restrict things that really don't pose a fire danger, then that is within the prerogative of the city council and it could do such. Here is the language from the state statute, and the state statute is intended to modify the International Fire Code, and it uses the term controlled use of any ignition source, and it doesn't define ignition source exhaustively, but it provides some examples, and it says including fireworks, lighters, matches, sky lantern, and smoking materials. The ignition sources listed in the draft ordinance are those that were recommended by our fire chief as the types of ignition sources that may pose problems. And I guess this is where I would pass the baton to Chief Tolman to help inform you as to why he felt those ignition sources were the ones that ought to be addressed.
I was talking to Jamie and David about, what happened last week in the city council meeting where we moved forward from here. To me, it was important that if we decide if you decide as a council and then me as the fire chief, under your direction, we feel it's a harsh enough season to ban fireworks and because we feel the risk is so imminent that it's important for us to do that under emergency declaration or an ordinance. To me, just focusing on the narrow scope of fireworks, if we're living in these extreme fire conditions, especially where a lot of our city falls under the wildland urban interface. I don't know if all of you had a chance to see that email I sent you earlier this afternoon that specifies what the WUI says. That's kind of where I was getting my guidance, both from what the state legislature said and from the wildland urban interface code. In my conversations with David and Jamie as far as what I think we should restrict. I think if we feel strongly enough that we need to take these actions, then we should be taking them against all things listed in the WUI and state code that are deemed a significant hazard as far as starting a wildfire. So does that help answer your question, or do you want me to expound any more on that?
No, I appreciate that explanation where it comes from. But as I read it, it gives the exceptions, and ours doesn't give the exceptions. And
Right.
so your thinking was, if we're banning all fireworks and not having exceptions, then we'd ban all flame sources.
Yeah, so the WUI code, as adopted by the city council, I think we adopted it 4 years ago, then when I became fire chief. Those statutes are in place already. The reason why I think it was important to reference that was more so to see where we're getting the language from for the rest of the ban. But you're right, as far as the WUI goes, we can already use those statutes within the WUI, and as a council, you can choose what to follow and what to extend from there. But the WUI itself is not, well, we're having an extreme hazard year, so let's follow the WUI. The WUI is the WUI every year, regardless of current conditions. So the ordinance being passed by the council tonight would be stricter than the WUI. But I just wanted to reference the WUI so we knew kind of where the language was coming from for the actions that we're taking. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know I feel like I'm giving a political answer, but that's kind of where it came from, is using that language to help define what we as a city need to do to provide the best protection possible.
All right. Other comments?
So I'm just doing another clarification. When it's written here that says outside smoking, is that to infer that a person can't step out on their porch, their personal property, their porch, and light up a cigarette? We're prohibiting people from smoking a cigarette on their personal property. Is that what I'm interpreting that sentence to say?
Are you referencing the WUI or the state code?
This section 1 that says this ordinance will prohibit outside fires, outside smoking, sparking machinery. So outside smoking, is that suggesting that we're prohibiting or want to prohibit somebody from smoking on their back porch?
Correct.
I think that's beyond what we want to do here today. I'm not comfortable with those two words in this ordinance.
How specific would outside fires be? Bringing up, like a smokehouse or a grill. Again, are we being a little too strict here? Any open flame?
Honestly, I know you're not gonna like this answer, but it's the answer you get from me. I'm gonna pump this back to the council. When we just decided to have this conversation about restricting fireworks beyond what me as the fire chief and fire marshal already decided to restrict them to. Again, if we're gonna use the argument that it's strict enough that we can't have sparklers, and we can't have pops, and we can't have ground fireworks, then anything that if we're saying it's so extreme that we feel like any spark could potentially be a hazard to life and property, then those are lines in the sand that you guys are gonna have to draw, because I feel if we're taking those stances, it's pretty clear what the state law and the WUI allows us to do.
Appreciate that. One of the differentiations I'm making on this is a fireworks spark is not something that's controllable. A fireworks, we really don't know how they're going to go off, if they go off in the intended direction or not. A person smoking has a little bit more control with regards to that aspect of it. Sparking machinery, again, there's a little bit more human and responsible people, obviously. The fireworks is the one in my mind that it's not up to the person lighting off the fuse as to how it's going to go off. It just goes off the way it's going to go, and that's what I'm trying to protect the city from.
I can tell you that in further conversations over the last week with the state fire marshal, his take on this, and he's just a fire marshal, he's not an attorney or anything, so I mean, take that for what it is if we're going to enact these kind of outright bans or restrict beyond what we feel state code allows, and yet we're going to pick and choose the things within state code or the WUI that we deem as a hazard, then that in his mind, he feels like that's opening the door even further for these lawsuits that are being filed. You are singling us out. If you truly believed it was that big of a hazard to ban ground fireworks and every single kind of firework, but yet you're still going to allow outdoor open flames and other things listed in the state code, is it really as big of a hazard as you're claiming? Again, I'm not trying to make the argument one way or the other. This is me regurgitating what I was told.
Yeah.
So don't take that as Chief Tolman gospel. That's just the direction we've been given.
Yeah, there is that risk out there.
Right. So I know it's hard. I don't.
I get concerned.
Say, you know,
Yeah.
and some of it does seem unreasonable, but it's as a team, the council and David and Jamie, we just have to decide what we feel is appropriate, and those answers aren't always easy. Hopefully the public understands that.
And for me, as I read the UI, smoking, outdoor fires, equipment that generates sparks, all have an exception saying, and to me, it sounds like we can ban or restrict things. However, these have exceptions, but fireworks doesn't have an exception.
Right.
So to me, I think the code even allows us to do what we're talking about, is be more restrictive on fire, because there's not an exception here that says except within, if you're more than 30 feet from brush, grain, forest, areas, where the other ones do say, exception, use of approved equipment, inhabited premises or designated campsites that are minimum 30 feet from any of the sources. So I think we have the opportunity to be more restrictive on fireworks. I agree with Councilman Windsor's comments. Of all these different items, the fireworks is the least controlled. And for any of the people that are wanting to threaten lawsuits, we simply need to look at the fire that started up in Uinta and in a matter of minutes blew through 2 communities. We are at the mouth of a canyon where wind can cause a problem. Now, yes, somebody who's not paying attention or irresponsible might start a fire with their cigarette, or might start a fire with, some other thing. I don't know. My feeling is either we limit it to fireworks and take care of that and have a further discussion of the others, or we look at an exception for some of these others and pull out the wording that's right here in the UI and just say, no outdoor smoking except for, as it states, and no sparking machinery except for, as it states here. And that way, if somebody's doing construction work for the city or even for their own house, they need to make sure that they've got at least 30 feet of no dry grass, brush, forest. And that's my feeling, that I think we can go that route.
I think that's a a good option to take. I support that.
I agree too. I feel like it's almost counterproductive if we're banning, how do they term it, sparking machinery, and someone's trying to clear out some limbs that are a potential fire hazard, but then they can't use a machine to do that. That doesn't make sense to me either. So I support what Councilman Soroka said.
Okay, Jamie, is that some language we can add?
Yes, so I've been making text edits following the conversation of the council, and I don't want to presume where you would go and vote with this, but here's language that I believe captures the intent of what Councilman Soderquist is proposing. It's in section 1, prohibition on personal fireworks, and it says pursuant to the provisions of the Utah Code annotated 15A5-202.5, comma, and based on the findings as noted above, comma, the use of fireworks are hereby prohibited in all areas of South Weber City. And so instead of saying ignition sources, we just call out fireworks. And I believe that's within what the statute allows you to do.
Okay. And did you revise the wording for any of those, or you're taking all the rest
I
out?
removed the others. If I could take a stab at drafting language, if you would like to leave the other ignition sources in, but I simply removed the other sources.
What is your feeling? I know that we heard from the state fire marshal. Is that what you said? That it opens us up to litigation if we just single out fireworks. How do you feel about that?
Litigation's a concern. Certainly, it's been threatened publicly by the companies that market and sell fireworks. It's a big industry for those organizations. The state code does not prohibit a citywide ban, but I can see how other attorneys read it that way because it has a criteria by which you have to establish those areas where fireworks can be restricted. So first, what you need is a determination from the city fire chief that the conditions in the city are high risk for fire. Those are my words. That's a generalization of what the statute provides. I think we have that from Chief Tolman. And then there are the criteria that we talked about when we met last week, that mountainous, brush covered, forest covered, or dry grass covered areas within 200 feet of waterways, trails, canyons, washes, ravines, or similar areas, and then the wildland urban interface area. And then the statute allows, if it's not feasible to draw a bright line, you can err a little bit beyond those areas if that's necessary to draw the bright line. And if I understood what I heard from the council last week, it was that enough of the city falls within those categories that it was only feasible to draw a bright line by restricting the use of fireworks within the city as a whole.
That is correct.
How do you feel about the other items, though? I agree with Chief Tolman. I mean, even if the UI already has those restrictions, I don't think people know it. And it might be good to, while we're putting out this, remind people of those other requirements. I don't know. Or do we do it in a separate document?
I think the reminder could be a public service announcement, but I think this ordinance, in my opinion, should be specific to just fireworks.
How does the council feel about sky lanterns though?
So that's considered firework or not?
When you let off
Like from Tangled.
yeah, like Tangled.
Oh, I need to watch it again.
I think they should be banned.
I think they should be
Yeah.
banned too. There's no control there.
It's,
Right.
yeah, it's very similar to a firework, just slower.
Yeah, can we keep those in, fireworks and sky lanterns?
Sure. So the text that here would be the use of fireworks and sky lanterns are hereby prohibited.
And are there any other devices out there we're not naming? Do we need to say and similar devices?
What we could say is borrowing language from the statute and the fire code, that ignition sources like fireworks and sky lanterns.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, is the council comfortable with that language?
I think it goes too far. I'm only comfortable going just fireworks.
Not sky lanterns. What's,
I think we can do public service announcements, but just to make a prohibition on all things, it's yes, I think it goes too far.
I feel like a sky lantern could be considered an aerial firework. If you wanted to, a really slow aerial firework that's uncontrolled.
It is the same concept as a firework that you don't have any control over it. You light a little thing and you send it up to the sky.
Not to interject in council comments, but I think sky lanterns are more dangerous than fireworks.
Yeah.
The fire chief, sky lanterns scare me far more than fireworks do. Fireworks can shoot 200 feet and then it's done. A sky lantern, you light that, it can go anywhere. In fact, it was just less than a decade ago that in Twilla, they launched a bunch of sky lanterns and burned down a warehouse in West Valley.
Especially with our wind, I feel like it's,
So it's, now it's one launched in Twilla landing in West Valley. There's just no saying where sky lanterns are gonna go. That's just one of my opinion there was.
I guess I have a better understanding of what a sky lantern is now.
So I would recommend we keep that in the language to prohibit sky lanterns.
I concur that I like the idea of sending out just a public announcement, reminding the public about open flames and the 30 feet and what you brought up there. I think that would be a good reminder for everybody. Just another point of a grammatical correction. I'm not sure if we want to do, but we do have the word restriction in the second sentence under section 1. We got all the other ones from restricted to prohibited, but this restriction shall remain in effect until April 15th. Do we want to change that to prohibition, or is that restriction the right word?
Change to prohibition.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. That's been changed. Thank you.
All right, any other comments? And do I have a motion?
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we adopt ordinance number 2021-09 as modified and reread by our attorney, Jamie Blakesley.
Okay,
The removal of outside smoking, sparking machinery and outside fires.
okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any further comments? Was that motion, did that
Fair enough.
cover?
Yes.
everything? Okay,
I just would like to thank staff and our chief for being on hand to help us through this. We appreciate it.
yes, thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks for coming. Okay, then we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilwoman Alberts.
Aye.
Aye.
I
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your input. All right, I will now entertain a motion to enter closed session per UCA section 52-4-2051D to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll move to closed session.
Haley. And Windsor, second. Aye. I just didn't have the concepts of it. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thanks again, chief.